Hello, welcome. Today I am going to be looking at leadership and its link with codependency and narcissism in the organisation. Only this week I've had two people come to me for support because of upset at perceived bullying in the organisation. And the sad thing is that very often what happens is that the bully is left in their position while the victim is left unsupported, outstressed, or has to leave. So let's have a look at this and see how can we maybe become aware of our organisations and see if our organisation is a healthy organisation. Does it tolerate narcissism? Are we fostering codependency? So I wonder how many organisations are dysfunctional. Are they run by executives and employees who are replicating codependent or unhealthy, narcissistic, dysfunctional family system patterns of behaviour at a cost to their people and the organisation as a whole? I have noticed in my work that increasingly clients are presenting to my practice with major stress issues due to unhealthy functioning of relationships, particularly those in authority and in the working environments. They feel stressed because they're not allowed to voice or to have a voice or to express their feelings, which leads to their creative input being stifled and their personal views and needs not being met. They feel very undervalued and fear dismissal if they give their views. Not sure that's a healthy environment for our people. And I'm not sure that the organisation benefits, because if we're not allowing people to be creative, then how does the organisation really grow, and how does it gain from the knowledge of everybody, because everybody has something to give. The healthy person recognises that they have a choice, and those people leave when they are targeted by the narcissist. But then, unfortunately, the narcissist moves on to their next victim, because narcissists, as I said before, have to feed. They need fuel, and they will feed off whoever it is that they, as I mentioned before, codependents give, narcissists take. So they look for the next giver that they can feed off. And so the healthy person will leave. That means the organisation loses good people, and the narcissist then goes off to look for the next person to feed off, and unfortunately that's very often a codependent. So I'd ask you, on a scale of 1 to 10, right, your people, where would you and your organisation, well, say, look at leaders, right? On a scale of 1 to 10, a lot of leaders intellectually are high. But where would you put your people emotionally on a scale of 1 to 10? Very often, a lot of leaders are low, right? And it's how can we actually change that to bring our leaders up higher on that scale of 1 to 10? And even if we are low, there's nothing, awareness is progress. So being aware of where we are on that scale of 1 to 10 emotionally is progress. But we need to have leaders that are high 1 to 10 emotionally and high 1 to 10 intellectually if we really want to have organisations that function well. But if we actually have narcissists functioning in the organisation and codependents functioning in the organisation, we have people working in the organisation that are low emotionally. and we have to support them to actually get high in that emotional scale. So how do we do this? Okay, so first of all then, let's look at what does codependency look like, or how does it affect the organisation. Codependency may cause one to avoid at all costs conflict, and such people have a high tolerance for confusion and crisis, so they're often peacemakers. Is it possible this tendency for codependency may have been conditioning from their childhood, and then they go into the organisation very accepting of this? If they have a narcissistic parent or parents, they will think then that it's acceptable to accept a narcissistic boss. There are two types of businesses. There's the family business and non-family business. And actually how I come to study psychotherapy was to actually study it to actually work with family businesses, because I come from a family business background, and when our family business was maybe having relationship difficulties, the only people available to us were people who had financial expertise, whereas what we need was people who had relationship expertise. So that's how I came to actually study the area that I'm now working in. But in the family business, what happens is the dysfunctions from the family come into the business, and it affects the business. So it can cause conflict, and the rivalry that's in the family can come into the business. And if we're codependent at home on the parents, or if there's narcissism at home on the parents, it will come into the business. So we need to be aware of these dynamics, and we need to actually really have a very professional structure in place, so that the business and the family and their objectives don't overlap, and that we professionalize the business. But looking at the non-family business, codependency may cause us to avoid conflict at all cost. And we need to look and see, is that happening in our business? Are we as leaders avoiding conflict that's really very apparent to us? And in that way then, are we not supporting conflict that's before our very eyes, and therefore not supporting our people? I have found in my work with clients that they were unconsciously playing their part in replicating patterns of the past. They often played a part in keeping unhealthy situations going, but at a cost to themselves, helping facilitate the narcissist to continue the behaviour, which in the long term is not helpful to the organisation. So what I mean there is that because they might have bowed to the narcissistic parent or the narcissistic partner or the narcissistic sibling, they think it's normal, and so therefore they will just accept whatever behaviour comes to them in the organisation. And they also think other people should do so too. However, all too often when the codependent or the victim of the narcissistic abuse in the organisation try to get help from senior management, when they do see that it's not okay, the abuse is ignored and they are unsupported. Just like often in the family of origin, when they probably did look for help from one or other of the parents, that was also ignored, and they were told to just perhaps put up with it. Either they were creating a drama, or she's the drama queen. So it's like the abuse is being replicated in a way. So I would just ask you to just look and see, is this possibly your organisation? Having been a consultant and presenting leadership courses for over 15 years, I found that 70% of the people who have attended my courses are codependent. This means that they are unable to carry out the tasks that are expected of them. Because they need people's approval, they are afraid to cause conflict. They're afraid that people will turn against them. They are afraid then to be assertive. They're afraid to give feedback. They're afraid to delegate because people might think that they're doing nothing. They're all the time thinking through the other people's eyes as opposed to thinking about their role and what they need to be doing. Right? So it keeps them really stuck in their positions. So the first thing I've got to do is work with them to help them be aware that they're codependent and that that's keeping them stuck in their role. Another interesting pattern I notice is that a high percentage of senior people don't tend to go on the courses. They tend to send mid-management. Perhaps they don't feel the need to change. And very often the narcissists don't end up going on courses because perhaps they think it's everybody else that needs to change, which is the way narcissists think. Or they're not challenged to. So they don't attend. This is a huge loss to the progress and the growth of the company and to the health and safety of their employees. So let's look at the effects of codependency. It's important, at least to those vulnerable to codependency, to get the support to change. If they don't, this will interfere with their ability to carry out their role, which again is a loss to them personally and to their organisation. When we explore this vulnerability, we find that their fear of rejection is the central issue. And because they are looking for external validation, they are therefore giving power to others and are at risk of being bullied or controlled unfairly because they are seeking their colleagues' approval just as they sought their parents' approval as children. They therefore avoid important tasks, such as being assertive, giving feedback, delegating, and generally communicating with their team, the important tasks of the leader or supervisor. So that has to affect the organisation because it means then their people are not being led, right? It's nearly like being on a ship without a person steering it. So they're actually passive leaders. I also find the codependents are poor time managers or planners because they can't say no. Their plan goes out the window. So their plans are worthless because they're always constantly changed, because they always put other people's plans as it being more important to theirs. So they're unable to stick to a schedule, and some don't even bother planning, which causes them to be unreliable. They just keep saying yes, but still let people down because they're so busy pleasing everybody. So, because they've pleased everybody, they end up staying late and their own life gets out of balance and they get burnt out, which then affects their performance in the organisation. As previously mentioned, narcissism comes on the spectrum from healthy to pathological, and here I'm referring to the unhealthy, malignant narcissist, who can be charming but is self-serving, controlling, manipulative, unfeeling and disrespectful and emotionally abusive. They may feed off the codependent to survive, and they do not genuinely allow others to express different views, to be creative or express feelings. And they don't, which doesn't create for a healthy and happy working environment. This behaviour causes employees to become fearful, detached, mistrustful and demotivated and disconnected. This disconnection affects trust, which is essential to the growth and the organisation's bottom line. Also it can cause a large turnover in numbers. And sometimes a narcissist can take a dislike to a person for no particular reason, just because they actually can smell a vulnerability in that person, or because that person might be good at something that they're not, and they might feel threatened. And they can make life impossible for that person. And too often the organisation doesn't actually support that person who is the victim. They support the narcissist. I wonder why this is, and what message is that giving to other staff, that it's okay to behave this way. I have found in my work as a consultant to companies Where there's an absence of trust, there can often be political game playing, where people's energy is not being expended for the good of the company, but instead for employees' individual gains. And these games are being played by narcissists and unconsciously colluded with by codependents. Is this your company? Just like families, organisations tend to take on the personalities of those in authority. If these personalities are psychologically questionable, then the organisation will be dysfunctional, and people will have been conditioned to act and think in a particular way, which is unhelpful, becoming either codependent and refusing to see what's happening, or others can behave like like senior people, either being codependent, pleasing, say, narcissists. I have actually seen companies where senior people were codependent and they were being controlled by mid-management who were narcissistic. Yeah. So it's really important that we can identify what kind of patterns are going on in our organisation. Very good book I read many years ago called The Addictive Organisation by Ann Wilson-Sheff, and it's well worth the read. So to understand, who's playing what role in the organisation, and is our organisation behaving like an addictive system? All too often it presents with my clients. The power of denial can bring your organisation to the brink of destruction if you are in an addictive system, unless the dysfunctional narcissistic behaviour is challenged. So it's nearly like challenging an alcoholic who is actually destroying a family. And that takes awareness first, and that takes courage. Because I'm just thinking of the two ladies, two sets of ladies that came this week, and jeepers, the degree of distress is just so sad, and the impact of the distress, particularly on one of them, and then on her family. Yeah, it's just, I nearly feel it's not acceptable, but I get a sense that even when she goes back to her organisation, she's not going to be heard. They just want to literally just cover it over and move on. So it takes a really brave organisation to actually deal with the person that is causing the destruction within the organisation. The organisation will be destroyed, and will suffer. If it's just like if we leave an alcoholic becoming more and more unwell in a family, it will cause destruction in the family. While leaving a narcissistic unwell in an organisation, it will affect the growth of the organisation and the contentment of the organisation as well. And I am a bottom line person. I come from a background where I actually have run my own business in other areas, manufacturing, and I know that bottom line is really important. But at the same time, what contributes to our bottom line is people who are happy and content in their jobs, where they feel safe. And so I think we need to work from a value system that is aligned to that if we want to achieve the best for our organisation. So I think if the codependent is reconditioned and learns to behave assertively and is trained and is constructively is trained to be assertive and constructive in the organisational system, the system has a chance of shifting for the better. And that codependent can be at the top as well as in the middle, or be the victim. And the victim can be at the top. Often people at the top can be controlled by the narcissist. I'd ask you to ask yourself, are you one of those? And the unhealthy narcissist would lose their stranglehold. However, the avoidance and covering up of destructive or narcissistic behaviour, senior executives or mid-executives and team members, is all too familiar a story in organisations, which if left uncorrected leads to serious consequences for the health and welfare of all staff. If you think this unwell behaviour is happening in your organisation, don't ignore it. Like the addict, it will get sicker and sicker. And the organisation and its people will too. Seek the help you require to get emotionally well. And where the value system is aligned throughout the organisation, it will bring safety and trust to all your people. Everybody will benefit. So thank you for listening to this presentation on this very important subject on leadership, its link with codependency and narcissism in the organisation. As I mentioned, it presents very often to me, and it is vitally important that we really tackle narcissism in organisations and bullying in organisations, that we support people, be they codependent or not, to not be victims of narcissism in the organisation. I would encourage you to really look at understanding the dynamics in your organisation, and where you see that it's dysfunctional or unhealthy, that you have the courage to work on this so that all of your people feel safe moving forward and that your organisation can thrive and grow. Thank you.